Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm your host, Baker. Let's talk about stuff. Hey everybody, welcome back to the SuperBake podcast. I'm here to give you the review, or at least hopefully one of many reviews for a video game that I completed recently, Guardians of the Galaxy for the PlayStation 5 from Square Enix. Yeah, so I completed this game last week, and I think, like I said before, I'll try to do reviews on video games, here and there. It probably won't be very often just because I'm not a super big gamer, but this was definitely one that I wanted to talk about. My first one was the Psychonauts 2, so this will be my second video game review. So hopefully the second of many, I suppose. This game was, I know I said the Psychonauts 2 was one of the best games that I've played in many years, but this game might give that one a good run for its money. I would definitely consider this one of my personal favorites from 2021. Came out in around, I believe, October of last year. And yeah, this game was just fantastic. I mean, honestly, it felt less like a Marvel game and more like, I would almost consider it like another Guardians movie. It felt very true to the source material. Now, I've never read the comics. Again, like I've said before, I'm not a big comic book guy, so I'm not super familiar with the Marvel comics and the lore behind this, but as far as like just comparing it to the MCU version of the Guardians, this felt very, very true to what those were. I think they did a fantastic job of capturing a lot of the mannerisms and characteristics of those people from the films, and it definitely shows in this. The people from, I never pronounce this company's name right, Eidos Montreal, and of course Square Enix. Yeah, they did a fantastic job with this game, and not just giving each Guardian their own unique personality that we've kind of come to know and love from the movies, but also, I think just the game in general is just really good. The gameplay is great. It's a third-person shooter game, very similar to Mass Effect in terms of the controls, I would say. Reminds me a lot of Mass Effect in a lot of ways. You do assume the control of Peter Quill. That's pretty much the character you play throughout the game. The other characters, the other Guardians, they're controlled by AI, and while you can you can order them to use specific moves and attacks, as well as perform certain functions outside of combat, you don't really get to play as them directly, which that was kind of unfortunate. I was hoping to play as Rocket, since he's my favorite. He might be my favorite Marvel character, period. But regardless, I mean, they do a good job with what they have there. Oh, and of course, I will be talking about the story, as well as a lot of the gameplay elements in pretty heavy detail, so if you haven't played it yet, just consider this a spoiler warning. I am going to talk about it in pretty good detail, so... Story-wise, it's pretty much a standalone story. It doesn't really follow the movies. Again, I'm not sure if it follows a particular story from the comics that much, but yeah, it's completely separate from the stories. Like the first movie, they fight against the Kree. Ronan, he's not in this game. There is mention of Thanos, but it's not really Thanos. It's more of an illusion, so he's not really in this game either. This is really kind of its own standalone story. But basically, to kind of sum up the story, the Guardians are essentially tasked with, they're trying to capture a beast in what's known as the quarantine zone by the Nova Corps, and they're going to bring it to a character named Lady Hellbender, who plays a really big part in the story later on. And basically, they get there, they find one of the stones from the, what are those called? The stones that Thanos wants to use for the Infinity Gauntlet. Infinity Stones. I literally said the name, Infinity Gauntlet. They find an Infinity Stone and accidentally release an unknown creature that seems hellbent on destruction. They're captured by the Nova Corps, at which point Peter is reunited with an old love interest, Corel, as well as her daughter, Nikki, who Peter, just putting together some basic math, realizes that Nikki could very well be his daughter, and so that's a big major point of the story too, and Nikki turns out to be a very big character in there, as well as they also meet a character named Breaker, who becomes a very big antagonistic character later on in the story. And then basically the characters are trying to pay a fine that they owe to the Nova Corps, And so they have this really funny, like, comedic moment with Lady Hellbender where they basically have to sell one of their own party members to her and try to pass him off as this rare beast just to see what kind of price they can fetch from her for it. And it leads to this very funny comedic moment. And then, of course, Adam Warlock from the comics is in this game as well, and he plays a pretty big role too. He essentially is the person that that Raker and his church, known as the Universal Church of Truth, are trying to find, and they consider Adam Warlock their golden god because he's literally golden. And then basically the Guardians have to try to work to stop the Universal Church of Truth from basically brainwashing the entire universe into one big giant cult. And that, in a nutshell, is kind of the story. I won't give away too much about it because this game is it's such a fantastic game, and I really do think you benefit better from going into it blind. I think I say that about a lot of stuff that I reviewed on this show, but I really do believe that here. I just want to, and then also just to kind of give some props, like the voice acting in this game is just phenomenal. It's fantastic. The actor they got to play Rocket, he sounds a lot like Bradley Cooper. If I hadn't known any better, I would have thought it was him. Of course, Groot, I think really, that's not a super difficult voice to do, but the actor that plays him does play him very well. The notable voice acting, though, I really want to give to the actor for Peter Quill. He's really good. Like, he gives a lot of heart to this character. Let me see, what was his name? John McLaren. Yeah, he's fantastic in this, like as Peter Quill. And then Jason Cavalier as Drax the Destroyer. Like, he's fantastic too. His Drax in this game, I think I might actually like. Don't get me wrong, I like John Batista's. Or Dave Bautista's version of Drax, but this Drax the Destroyer, I think he gives Dave Bautista a good run for his money. His delivery and timing is just fantastic. There's a great scene where when they're talking to Lady Hellbender, and she's basically hitting on Drax because she's a character who very much values strength and power over anything else. And of course, Drax is just like this big, bulky warrior, and so she sees Drax, and she's basically just, flirting with him pretty heavily. And Drax has this great moment where he just kind of leans in towards Peter Quill and he goes, "Peter Quill, I believe Lady Hellbender is flirting with me." And it's just, his delivery is just so great. And then, of course, Gamora in this game is fantastic too, played by Kimberly Sue Murray. She's great as well. And what I really liked about her character was I love how there really isn't much of a love interest between her and Peter Quill. Like there was in the movies. I kind of like that, honestly, just because, it's not that it was a huge focus of the movies, but, it seems like in a lot of stories like this, if, anytime when you have the general, like, hero lead and then, like, like a female counterpart in his team, it seems like there's always kind of got to be, like, a love interest story going on, and there really wasn't in this game, and I like that. Like, to me, they kind of come off as just more of teammates, and they have a mutual respect for one another, and I definitely appreciate that more in this game. Like they could have like ham-fisted in like a, like a really cheap romance that you have to try to go for with her, and I kind of thought that they didn't do that. She's a member of the team, and she has and she serves a very important role in combat too, and that's another great thing about this game too is the combat. In the beginning, it doesn't seem to be super deep and complex. Basically, every character has their own unique abilities that they can use. You, as Star-Lord, you use your pistols that Peter uses, which you find out later in the game, they have like an elemental effect that you can use, which is really cool. That opens up a lot of different options in combat. And you also have like your jet boots that you can use to kind of hover around the area and also dodge enemy attacks. So you have a lot of good mobility as Star-Lord. And then each of the other Guardians have like their own unique abilities that they can use. So for example, I almost said Garfield, I don't know why. Groot, for example, he can basically, like, he's kind of a tank in a way. So he can use like his roots to create bridges outside of combat to help you get across like large gaps. In combat, he can use his roots to basically like hold enemies down to make it easier to hit them with like some of your heavier attacks, like Rocket, for example, who is basically in a way, he's kind of like the wizard or the mage of the game. Like, he just hurls bombs at enemies and uses big explosive attacks on them. Then you have Drax, who's just kind of like the brawler who you can just sick him on enemies and he'll just beat the crap out of them. And then Gamora, who's kind of like she's almost kind of like the rogue of the group, where she uses stealth attacks and does massive damage with her swords. And it's really cool using their different abilities together. And then, of course, you have like your big ability, which is basically like a team huddle, where basically Quill will call in all the Guardians together, and basically you kind of give them like a pep talk almost, like kind of like what you see like in football games when the team kind of all gathers up in a circle. And so like you kind of have to look for like key words to figure out like what to say to them that'll really kind of get them amped up for the fight. And then of course it, because Peter Quill has like that, that mixtape, it plays an awesome like 80s pop rock song in the background while you're fighting. And that is so great. Like, there was one part in the story, I think it was actually the final boss fight, where it started playing I Need a Hero, and it's just or the hero song, and it was so fitting. It was so great. Like, there's a lot of that in this game. And then, like, when you're on the ship, like, I love the soundtrack for Guardians. It's such a great soundtrack in general. Like, when you're on the ship, there's a part where it's playing, like, We're Not Gonna Take It by Twisted Sister, and just hearing that play in the background is just so funny to me. But it was strange that this was made by Square Enix. Well, I think they were the publisher. The developer was that Eidos Montreal company. So, but still, I mean, it's from Square Enix. They published it, and it's just weird. This doesn't seem like a game that Square Enix would do. It definitely feels more like a AAA feature title, like when they usually used to pump them out, like those AAA feature games, like that would be from like back in the day when they would make. Like, whenever a new movie would come out, it seemed like there always had to be like a video game based off of it, regardless if it was good or not. This seems like it would be one of those games, but I can safely say it's very good. I never played the Avengers game. I heard not great things about it, but I can safely say this game won me over almost immediately. If for nothing else, like, yes, it's tremendously fun to play, but the characters, I think, more than make up for, I think, any downsides to it. Like I said before, definitely one of my favorites from 2021. I would highly recommend this game a lot. And it's not incredibly long either. I think altogether, I didn't complete it, but I think altogether I probably spent about maybe between 15 to 20 hours, which seems pretty standard for a game like this. But it went by fast, and there is a New Game Plus option, so I'm definitely going to go in and play it at least twice, because when you do New Game Plus, you can carry over all of your upgrades and your different suits that you unlock, and that's really cool. I love New Game Plus, and I wish more games would implement that. It's such a great feature, and I don't understand why more games don't use it. So, but yeah, this was definitely a game that I thoroughly enjoyed. Pretty much from beginning to end. And honestly, once I found out how far I was into the game, I really, I was actually almost kind of bummed, because I was like, man, I want this to keep going. To my understanding, there's not going to be any DLC for it. I believe that Square Enix had said that this was going to be basically a one-and-done game, which is kind of a bummer. I would love it if they would make more content for this. I would totally pay for it, for sure. As far as I'm aware, there's no plans for a sequel, but it did just come out recently, so it might be a little while. But I'm hoping the success of this game and just the fact of how good it is I hope that will persuade the developers to at least consider making another one, because I loved this game, and I definitely want to get the word out that this game deserves to be played. It's so good. And I think one of the things that makes it so good is that there's a lot of heart to this game that I was not expecting. There's a lot of good, heavy moments in the story that really kind of caught me off guard, as far as like mainly between the character of Peter Quill, who again is such a fantastic character in this game. He really brings a lot of humanity to the team. Like in the movies, you definitely kind of got the feeling that you kind of got a little bit of a feeling that he's the leader, but there's a lot of bickering between, Chris Pratt's version of Peter Quill and the other Guardians in the movies. But in this game, you definitely feel like Quill is this character he's in this leadership role. He's clearly a little over his head in this position, because he's not used to it. And of course, leading this team of people who would be. but he's trying the best he can with what he has. And there's a great moment in the story where he actually does lose his temper a little bit. And it's a strong, heartfelt moment where you can see like the other Guardians are actually legitimately upset that he loses his temper with them. You know, even like Groot and Drax, these two big characters that really could probably crush Peter with their bare hands. But it's cool to see that you really do feel this relationship between all five of them. These are people that they really do view each other as not just teammates and friends, but even also family on another level. And that's a big theme in this game, is family. Another big element in the story, and again, not to go into too much detail, is between Peter Quill and the character Nikki, the girl from before that he suspects might be his daughter. And there is she plays a huge role in the story later. And again, not going to spoil it, because I feel like it really does do a huge disservice to the game if you know about it going into it. It won't hit as hard as it does. But there's a really heartbreaking moment with her character later in the story, and it's the way they handle it and the way they are able to put Quill in this situation where he's able to relate to this character and kind of bring some of his tragedy to help her understand how to cope with hers is just, it's the way it's done very well. And like I said, it's a genuinely touching moment in the game. This is a game that I think has what a lot of games lack, and like I said before, it's heart. This game has a lot of heart to it, and I thoroughly enjoyed it for that. Yeah, I don't really have a lot of negative things to say about this game. I pretty much loved it from beginning to end. There are some moments in the game where you do pilot the ship, the Milano, but those parts they're okay, they're fine. There's not a lot to them, to be honest. The controls are pretty basic, and those levels feel pretty bland compared to the rest of it, especially when you compare it to the parts where you're on foot fighting with the Guardians. Those parts are the highlight of the game. The ship parts where you're flying the ship around, I mean, I don't have any complaints there. It's fine, but to me, I guess they could have done a little bit more. It's almost kind of like the gummy ship moments from the Kingdom Hearts games, or at least the first one, although it's nowhere near as boring as that was. But I guess to that point, it just doesn't feel like there's a lot of substance there. So that I guess that would be one avenue that I probably would, if I could, I would change it just a little bit. Maybe just make the ship moments a little bit more engaging, especially like the big ship battles. That would have been cooler, but it's also cool to see a lot of the locations from the movie in this game, like Nowhere. The giant celestial head is in this game, and that's cool to see. And then, of course, Thanos. He makes a very brief appearance. I won't give away too much on that, but that's interesting. It's kind of cool too. And then Adam Warlock's character. I love his character. He's so funny. Like the way he talks, his speech pattern. Like he uses a lot. I don't know if this is how he is from the comics. It might be, but like he'll say a lot of words that all start with the same letter. So like he'll say something like, "We've been." I'm trying to think of what an example was, but like he'll say like a series of words that all begin with like the same letter. So for example, like "We've been captured by crazed cannibals" or something like that. And it's so funny. And like there's a part in the game where the other Guardians, especially Rocket, kind of make fun of him for it, and I love it. And like it's so great. There's so many great funny moments in this game. Yeah, and yeah, like again, it's to me that the highlight, the best part of it is definitely the characters and the dialogue that they have. Yeah, sorry, I had to get some coffee. I'm kind of crashing right now. I'm really tired. I meant to get this episode up earlier in the week, but just it's been kind of a crazy busy week. So yeah, but yeah, this was, again, like I said, I plan on going back and playing this game at least one more time on New Game Plus, just to try to unlock some of the other stuff that I didn't get the first time. But yeah, like a lot of other characters from the comics and the other story are in there. Like I said, Adam Warlock's in there. Mantis is in there as well. She plays her role is kind of interesting. I think they made her a little bit more, she's different from how she is portrayed in the movies. In this game, she's a little bit more scatterbrained, because I think she can kind of see like different like timelines. And so I think it's like it's kind of hard for her to focus on a particular one. So she kind of seems a little bit like scatterbrained at many points, but still, I like her character a lot. Of course, Lady Hellbender, her character is awesome. I love how they did her character. Fing Fang Foom, the dragon, I believe is also a character from the comics as well. His character is really cool too. And then of course the dog Cosmo. God, the psychic dog, who again was also from the very first movie. He didn't have a very big part in it, but oh my God, the parts with his character are just fantastic. I love it. Every scene he is in is so funny. Just like the way he talks about, like the stuff that he does as a dog, and he's this threatening, almost kind of like gangster character in the story. Like he has a lot of influence in the galaxy, but he's a Labrador retriever, and it's just so funny. I love every scene with his character is just fantastic. I do wish it would have been cool to see a few other Marvel characters in there. It would have been nice to see Howard the Duck in this game. He's not in it, and I know he made a very small cameo in the very first Guardians movie, as well as Avengers Endgame, which I didn't know that for years, but yeah, that was it's such a great game. And I feel like there's a lot of self-aware moments in the game too. There's a moment near the end of the game where you're basically in the middle of this giant, just awesome space fight, and Quill kind of has this line where he says, "God, that was just so metal," and I just remember thinking, yeah, that was pretty cool. Like if I had to give an overall score to this game, I'd probably say, I'm gonna go ahead and give it like a strong, probably a 9.6, 9.7 out of 10. Like it's such a fantastic game. I think it's a slightly higher rating than what I gave Psychonauts 2. The only reason I think I'm rating this a little bit higher is because, and don't get me wrong, I loved Psychonauts 2, but this game just has so many good things going for it. The combat's really good, the controls are really good, the story and characters are really good, and I mean, this is one of those games where like I desperately hope that they make another one. I would love to see this turn into at least a trilogy of games. Like I don't need a whole series of games for these characters, but I would love to see at least one or two more games in this series. I think it'd be so great. I know the movies. I think James Gunn has said that the next Guardians film is probably going to be the last one that he makes. As far as if that means it's going to be the last Guardians movie, period, who knows? I mean, if it makes enough money, I'm sure it won't be, but it sounds like it's going to be the last one he's going to do, and he wants to try to give the team a good send-off. So I would love to see this turn into a trilogy of games. I think that would be really cool to see. And honestly, there's a lot of material for them to work with. This doesn't follow any of the stories from the movies, so I mean, then there's plenty from the comics they could use. So, as well as other members of the Guardians that I'm sure could come into play as well, like in future titles. So, I mean, there's plenty for them to work with here. So, I mean, there's definitely the possibility, there's potential for a sequel or even sequels, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see. But yeah, this has a strong recommendation for me. I think it's also it's on the PlayStation 4 as well as the Xbox One and the Xbox One. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't played it already, definitely pick it up. I think it's definitely worth the price. It's such a great game. Like even if you're not a Marvel fan, it's just a good game in general, and like the characters are just so endearing. The story is so good. High praise from me all around. Not a lot of negative things to say about it, to be perfectly honest with you. I just hope we get more of it down the road. So, okay, well, I think that's going to conclude my review for the Guardians of the Galaxy game. I know I keep saying I'm going to give the Midnight Mass review up, or I'm going to get it up here soon, so that actually is going to be the very next episode, so I'm going to just work on getting that uploaded coming up here pretty soon, so probably get that up probably like later this weekend, I think, so that'll be... Today is the 29th, so I'll probably get it up tomorrow, the 30th, So yeah, anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode. Go out and play this game. It's fantastic, and I will catch you guys next time. Later.